After winning the Democratic nomination in a bit of a landslide, we've known for weeks now that Keisha Lance Bottoms, former Atlanta mayor, is going to be the Democrats' pick to run for governor of Georgia. We didn't know about the Republicans until last night when it was solidified that Rick Jackson, after he defeated Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, would be on the ticket against Miss Bottoms come November. And joining us this morning to react in her first live local interview since Jackson's win is Keisha Lance Bottoms. Miss Mayor, it's nice to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So the race is set. What did you make of the results last night and the fact you'll be facing a political outsider?
They're one and the same, and I do take exception with describing him as a political outsider.
Tell me why.
He certainly has made millions of dollars, $1 billion, in fact, since 2020 from the state of Georgia. So I don't know how much more inside you can be than making your fortune off the backs of the people of this state. So he may call himself a political outsider, but he's as inside as it gets.
Well, look, he has deep pockets. Already poured tens of millions of dollars into this race. No telling how much more could be spent between now and November. How do you balance the need to raise money against somebody who already has it?
Yeah, listen, this is like Elon Musk has come to Georgia. This guy has an unlimited amount of money, but the power still rests with the people. No matter if you are a billionaire or a gazillionaire, as I describe him, you still get one vote. So we've had over 40,000 people, grassroots donors, to contribute to our campaign at KeishaForGovernor.com. We're encouraging people, give what you can and then do what you can. For some people, that may mean just showing up to vote. For others, it may mean rolling up your sleeves and volunteering with our campaign. I'm used to doing a lot with a little. I'm no stranger to that. Would I love to have over $100 million just to blow on the campaign? Yeah, of course I would. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to talk to the people about the issues that matter to them, and that's going to be the difference maker.
Look, 139 days until the election. I think we just got a peek into some of your messaging. We also got a peek last night into Mr. Jackson's messaging. I want to play a 30-second clip. He says something about you, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Keisha Lance Bottoms did such a bad job as mayor. She didn't even run for re-election. She would be an absolute disaster for Georgia. When violence surged, families were afraid, businesses worried, and police officers needed support. Keisha Lance Bottoms turned her back on all of them. Keisha Lance Bottoms failed. She hopes Georgians forget what happened when she was in charge. I won't let them.
All right, Ms. Mayor, I want to get your response to that.
Yeah, lies. I left the city of Atlanta with an approval rating of over 60%. I still live in Atlanta. I still live in Southwest Atlanta. Historic pay raises for police and firefighters in our city, and it's a convenient messaging on his part, but it's not accurate. At the end of the day, this election is about what the people of Georgia want for their future. And what they are saying is we want Medicaid expanded. This guy is saying, I'm not going to expand Medicaid, although he's made more than $1 billion from health care in this state. People are saying, I want support for small businesses. I want affordable housing, workforce housing. I want our literacy rates to be improved. We want free technical and community college. He's not talking about any of the issues that matter to people most. He's talking about pleasing Donald Trump, and in his own words, he said that he will be Donald Trump's favorite governor. Read between the lines there.
I do want to touch on some of the issues that you just alluded to, some, and what you would do if you served as governor, but just kind of piggybacking off what Rick Jackson was saying there, you've been asked a number of times, and you will again in the coming months, about your decision not to run for a second term, a decision you say you don't regret. But I want to ask it a different way.
Sure.
Do you feel you have any unfinished business as mayor of Atlanta that you could complete as governor?
Yeah, I was proud of my record as mayor of Atlanta. We built and or preserved over 7,000 units of affordable housing, created a child savings account for all of our public school kindergartners. We created an affordable housing trust fund. We left $180 million in the bank. There were a list of accomplishments that I had, a list that I wanted to complete in my term as mayor, and I did. I can say that this is a very big state. Obviously, Atlanta is the capital city, but the needs across this state are many. There are many lessons learned and many things I believe we can build on from my time as mayor, including this Affordable Housing Trust Fund that I want to see expanded throughout the state. We created a Center for Workforce Innovation to train people for technical jobs, paying six-figure jobs. I believe we can expand something like that throughout the state. So there are many things that I see that we can build upon. But my time as mayor was one of the most difficult times in the history of this country, not just for me, but for people across this country. And even in the midst of those difficult times, the city of Atlanta still came out on the other side better than the vast majority of other cities in this country. So this race is about the future. This race is about delivering for the people of Georgia in the midst of all the chaos that's coming from Washington, D.C., the chaos that's coming from Donald Trump, that Rick Jackson is saying that he doesn't take exception to a single policy coming out of this Trump White House.
I want to ask you about voting rights. This morning, a special session convening beneath the Gold Dome here in Georgia, redrawing voting district boundaries. What do you think's at stake for Georgia voters as they meet?
Oh, so much is at stake. We don't know what to expect. Brian Kemp has said that he was not going to touch our maps, and now they are going back into special session to likely touch our maps. The Republican-led legislature created a complete debacle by saying we needed to do away with QR codes. As far as I know, there's not a solution that's been offered to replace these QR codes. There are a lot of issues that are on the table. And at the end of the day, none of them are addressing the real issues that people are concerned about. Certainly, access to the right to vote, access to ease of voting is important, but I'd much rather our legislature focus on those kitchen table issues that people are talking about as we move around the state. I wish that they were talking about Medicaid expansion today. I wish that they were talking about filling in some of these budget gaps from the cuts that are coming out of D.C., like our cuts to education funding, over $200 million, our cuts to health care. We've had over 500,000 people in this state since January who've opted not to have health care because of the way the premiums have gone up since the big ugly bill.
Ms. Bottoms, 1998 was the last time a Democrat won the governor's seat in Georgia. Will you visit all 159 counties between now and Election Day, and how do you convince rural voters to give you a shot?
I will, and we've been taking our case across the state anyway. We did that the entirety of the primary. We're actually headed up to Commerce, Georgia when I leave here this morning, and it's about talking about issues that matter to them. But what has really struck me, the consistency of those issues. By that I mean, like, we often think of affordable housing as just being an urban issue. It is an issue, lack of access to affordable and workforce housing in rural communities as well. Everybody wants access to great jobs. Everybody wants thriving schools. Our seniors want to age in place, and everyone wants easy access to health care. So as we're moving around the state, it's a great opportunity not just to talk about the solutions that I have to offer, but most importantly, to listen to our communities about what their needs are and how they need me to deliver as governor.
Look, you're going to be listening to a lot of farmers as you go about the state. Agriculture is such an important industry, as you know here. Tough times depending on who you ask, too.
Yeah.
Georgia Farm Bureau says tariffs pose threats to many Georgia farmers. Curious to know where you stand on tariffs and if there's anything the state can do to kind of alleviate pressure on farmers.
Yeah, and I've sat down with farmers, and what I've heard, there's several challenges here. Agribusiness business is the #1 industry in Georgia. Tariffs have had a huge impact, and especially in our rural communities, even access to broadband. There was a time where there were physical places that many of our farmers could go into to get additional information about resources, whether it be grants or small interest loans, et cetera. Most of these places have been closed around the state. We've got to reopen these facilities for people to be able to go into in their communities so they can access information. Everybody in the state doesn't have access to broadband. That's important. What I'm hearing from farmers is that quite often, especially farmers of color, by the time they learn about a program, the money is run out or the program has been closed. It's just a lack of access to information. And tariffs are hitting them especially hard. It's been very difficult for them to anticipate, adjust, and readjust based on whatever the flavor of the day is coming out of the White House.
What about white collar? I mean, you're up against Rick Jackson, who touts his business experience. Georgia prides itself as a top state for business. Governor Kemp's been a regular at the World Economic Forum in Davos. How are you going to keep Georgia on that stage?
Yeah, we have many Fortune 500 companies, more than a dozen, that are headquartered in the state. I've worked closely with many of those leaders. I did it as mayor of Atlanta. The metro economy at that time was the 10th largest in the United States. Our Center for Workforce Innovation, for example, that we opened at Atlanta Area Tech, that was done in lockstep with our business leaders, helping to get that center up and running, to train people for six-figure technical jobs. I have already made the case when I visited the Metro Chamber of Commerce that the same partnership that we've been able to capitalize on in Atlanta, we've got to be able to do it statewide, because we are only as strong as our weakest link. It doesn't matter if the Metro Atlanta area is thriving if the rest of the state is suffering. I've started having these conversations and look forward to continuing that partnership.
Look, talking about how big of a state it is, it's also a purple state. If you win, you'll also be representing folks who did not vote for you.
Yeah.
Would you commit to reaching across the aisle and include Republicans, maybe even some MAGA-minded folks in your administration?
Yeah, listen, I can tell you, you don't get anything done serving as mayor of Atlanta by just talking to people who voted for you. When I was mayor, I used to have to walk across the street to the Capitol to get things done. One of my biggest allies over at the state Capitol was the late Speaker of the House, David Ralston. We got a lot done together. We even worked with Governor Kemp on many issues. Those weren't the salacious things that got the headlines when we got things done together. It was always much more appealing to talk about things that we disagreed on. I don't have a problem working across the aisle. I've done it and will continue to do it. I'm not going to get ahead of my skis in terms of the makeup of my administration. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I can tell you this is a very big tent, and there's room for everybody under this tent as long as they are focused on doing the right things by the people of this state.
A few more minutes here with Keisha Lance Bottoms before she hits the road for an event in Commerce. The endorsements are going to start coming in on both sides. I imagine you already received one months ago from your former boss, former President Biden. Some news was made on that front yesterday when Hillary Clinton called it a terrible mistake for him to have run a second term. Based on the time you spent around President Biden, do you believe he should have run again?
You know what? I worked in the White House 22 through 23. But my experience with the president was that of someone who was a strong leader. So I was not at the table just in terms of whatever decisions that he and his family made in terms of his decision to seek a second term. But again, this race is about 2026. It's not about looking backwards. It's about us looking forward. And how we're going to be able to deliver for the state of Georgia. And with this Trump administration, many of the programs and funding sources that came into the state under the Biden administration have been gutted. And we've got to figure out how we're going to fill those gaps.
As you look forward, a win for you in November would mean history. You would become the first black woman governor in the history of our country. I've seen interviews with you where you say, I'm not thinking about that, or I'm not focused on that. But But is it in the back of your mind at all?
Actually, it's not. For me, it is much more personal. I've shared the story of my family going back at least 5 generations in the state to a plantation in Crawfordville, Georgia. Our family story, we can only trace back to once enslaved Betsy and Shepherd Peak on a plantation in Crawfordville. So for me, the legacy of where I am at this moment in time is not lost upon me. I can tell you, again, as I'm moving around the state, people want a strong leader. They aren't focused on my being a woman or my being a black woman, both of which I'm very proud of, but it's about the leadership that I bring to the table. And it's a reminder of how far we have come as a state and all the things that are possible in this state in just 5 generations. For me to have served as the mayor of Atlanta and to now have the opportunity to serve as governor of this state, I think should be an inspiration for us all.
We'll leave it there. Keisha Lance Bottoms on the road to commerce after this. Looking forward to many more conversations with you in the coming months. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We should also note we reached out to the Rick Jackson campaign last night, and this morning we were told no interviews as of yet, but of course we will keep trying.